What is up, YouTube? It is Aaron back here with the channel, and today I have a very special guest. I have Shane Tay, who is the Singaporean qualifier for Worlds this year. Shane, introduce yourself to us real quick.
Hi guys, I'm Shane. I'm from Singapore. Yeah, I play I play OCG and Asia English formats. Yeah, that's just me.
Perfect. All right, so we're gonna go through. I have a little slideshow prepared, just like questions that we have been wanting to ask, like OCG players, and you are obviously a very qualified representative, having just competed in Worlds, having found success in your region, and speaking very good English from our brief conversation prior. So I think it's going to be very beneficial for all of us, and specifically me, who has a lot of questions that I would like answered. So let us get into it. So first of all, what is your relationship with Yu-Gi-Oh? How long have you been playing? And yeah, just give us a little bit of background.
Yeah, so I started during COVID, 2020. I just wanted to pick something new up, and I had a friend who was very interested in Yu-Gi-Oh. He was playing competitively, like he played toss format, things like that in OCG. So I hit him up, and then I started learning the game. How much I actually practice? So leading up to the Asia final in Taiwan, and especially for Worlds in Paris, I definitely practiced a lot more. But on a regular basis, I actually only play the game once or maximum twice a week. So yeah, so in terms of like maybe a testing group, I do have a group of friends who they do play. Um, Shout out to them like Luyu, Aston, TJ, Eugene, AZ, Gautier, all of them. CL, of course, they lent me cards. So we are just like a big group of players, a mix of casual, semi-competitive, possibly even competitive players. We just play together. We just have fun with it. In terms of testing, I think we just throw around different ideas. But if it's like in terms of the TCG definition of testing, I would say I don't think it reaches that caliber quite yet. But I do also have a lot of the other Singaporean players who I personally believe are better than me. People like Ikang, Yogi Bear, Lao Niang. These people, I definitely reach out to them when it comes down to a bigger competition that goes beyond the Singapore borders. As for accomplishments and future goals, so my first top was actually in 2023, where I got top 16 in an event with Sprite Tri Brigade. I only started really kind of getting trophies last year, where I got second place at the Challenger Cup, which is Asia English format last year. And also, I got top 8 in the WCQ for Singapore last year. And then for this year, I actually got top 4 in the Challenger Cup. I won the Rank Up League, which is the appropriate channel to get to Asia Finals this year. And then I got second place at the Asia Final, which qualified me for Worlds, and I got top 8 there. My future goals would definitely be to, at minimum, return to Worlds and to become a world champion. I want to be the first OCG world champion since COVID.
That's sick. Yeah, I'm really happy to hear about that. So you said like described yourself that you like kind of just like obviously you're invested in the game and want to play competitively, but you primarily just like do this for the fun of it with your friends and are able to find success in that. And I think that's the best way to go about it. Like I've definitely over the course of time changed my priority in terms of who I'm playing with because I can always like reach out to people who are really good at the game, but if I'm not actively enjoying the time that I'm investing in playing Yu-Gi-Oh, then like what's the point really? Like if I'm just grinding online playing Dueling Book, which is obviously like a TCG medium, or if I'm just like in a call with people, like I definitely want to be actively enjoying that process. And it sounds like you have the right priorities when it comes to that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Like, I think at the end of the day, like, no matter how serious you take the game, at the end of the day, it is still a game. There's still a luck factor to it. Of course, there's still skill, but improving that skill comes in practice. And if you're not enjoying what you do, then there's no real meaning to it. So, the real best way to improve, in my opinion, is to first and foremost just have fun and enjoy what you're doing. And you always tend to play the best when you're relaxed and having fun.
Well said. I think me and you are gonna get along based on that perspective.
That's
Um,
great.
so yeah, now that we've learned about you and your a little bit of your background, tell me a little bit more about like the Singaporean scene. like you said, the Challenger Cups, like what does that entail? So yeah, what events do you have, especially in Singapore, and then if any events you've traveled to in the rest of Asia? How big are they? Like how consistently do you travel? Stuff like that.
Okay, so I have to include kind of like a premise here. Well, two premises. The first being that I think I'm still a very, very new face on the scene. I only went to my first overseas event this year, which was the Asia Finals, and then my second time playing outside of Singapore was at Worlds. So I kind of blossomed out of nowhere, if you will. So with that in mind, I think my experience in terms of playing in other countries is extremely limited. But I can comment on certain events that have happened in Singapore. The other premise I have to kind of share is that in Singapore or in many of the Asian countries, we actually have two different formats. One is the OCG, which is essentially the Japanese card pool, if you will, which is what you'll see across in Japan, in China. Actually, I'm not sure about China, in Korea, things like that. We also have Asia English. So this is where you have the Asian print of modern cards. However, this is a smaller card pool with its own unique ban list. So in Singapore, we play both of these formats, and respectively so, they have two different kind of qualifiers for the Asia finals. So one for each format. So with that in mind, yeah, let me talk about Singapore's community or scene. So events that we have, we don't have that many events. I think I would confidently say about 4 events a year. We have things like Battle Nexus, which is essentially where you're just trying to win a mat. Then last year we had our first 3v3, which is just shared card pool, so that's pretty fun. Besides that, in the middle of the year, we do have Challenger Cup, which is the Asia English qualifier, and the WCQ, which is the OCG qualifier. And they're about sub 200 players. So Singapore's community, in comparison to CCG regions, is really quite small. Um, but yeah, so the community you kind of know everyone, and you can kind of just identify immediately if someone's completely new to the game or not. Um, yeah, so the attitude of players when they're playing, I would say that actually Singapore is made up mostly of casuals. They like to play fun decks, their unique strategies, pet decks, things like that. Like off the top of my head, I can think of a few people who are like branded loyalists, or they just play simply a Mondolce. There's one guy who plays Mondolce only. We also have this girl who only plays Mermail, and then her brother who only plays Labyrinth. So like we have a more casual setup, but there is a smaller pool of super competitive players who are also at an extremely high caliber, and to me, they're actually better players than me. I've learned a lot from them, especially in preparing for Worlds, where I reached out to like every single, in my eyes, better player. So pricing at locals or events, most of it is done within product. So we have our locals every week. It's kind of like it has a ranking system to it. What we call it ranking. So basically every week, on each weekend day, so Saturdays and Sundays, there'll be a store opening up their space where you can go there and play 5 rounds, and depending on how many rounds you win, you get points. So these accumulate over 6 months, which is determined as a season. At the end of the season, if you've reached the top 32, you qualify for playoffs for that ranking season. And within this playoff, once you reach there, top 32, you receive a mat. And then the winner of that, what we call rank up league, also goes to the Asia finals. So the pricing isn't exactly big money. It's not YCS level. I don't necessarily even think it's locals level for TCG side, but it is what it is. We also do have casuals in a few card shops as well. So sometimes they give out products to winners, or maybe in the form of pack credits, things like that. Shout out to Agora Hobby, the best casuals in Singapore, in my opinion. And yeah, so yeah, the value of the pricing not great. So the world's qualifying process in my region in Singapore. So how it works is basically each country, besides Japan, Korea, China, we will have 6 representatives fly out to Asia finals, 4 from the rank up leagues that I previously talked about, 1 from the Challenger Cup, and 1 from WCQ. So these 6 representatives from each country will go to wherever the Asia final is, and they will play roughly a 5 round Swiss, cut to top 8, and the 2 finalists of that tournament will get to go to Worlds. So we have a few routes to essentially qualify for the Asia final, be it ranking on a weekly basis, where you just want to try and accumulate enough points to qualify for that top 32 for the playoffs, or you can just win the WCQ or win the Challenger Cup, and then you'll get to fly to Asia finals, where you get to kind of square off against the best in Asia for that year. Any praises? I would. Okay, so the funny thing is that I think this comes in direct relation with TCG, where I had this conversation with quite a number of TCG players, where I said that it feels like our process is easier to actually qualify, and then other people were saying that no, it's not, because you have to go to this Asia final where you're fighting like the best in Asia. Whereas in other countries, you're essentially like you can just win a regional and get your invite and then do well in that event, which is completely fair. So I think in terms of what's easier, what's harder, what's a better process, I think it's down to perspective. I personally feel like I'm quite fortunate from my position. As Singapore's a small country, all I have to do is take the train once or twice a week to a shop, do relatively well, go 3-2 or 4-1 in a 5 round tournament, and then I just have to go to a rank up league and try and win that, or I can just show up one day to an event at like WCQ or Challenger Cup and just try and win that. So in my opinion, I actually praise the system for us. I think it is significantly um, simpler and easier than having to travel all around your region trying to qualify for points.
Yeah. I mean that sounds like the ideal scenario compared to like our points playoff, which it's like you're somewhat familiar with, where you're traveling to regionals and obviously our YGO level events where you can over the course of a season accumulate points and then go to the points playoff. And it sounds like you have a similar scenario, but just from more of like your local scene, which I think is what I would like the point playoff to eventually be, where you're not required to travel to every large regional, which is still in terms of like pricing and just like value, not like worth it. But in terms of like the overall end goal of the points playoff at Worlds, it obviously provides means to an end. That if I was
Yeah,
able to just like qualify for that points playoff through attending locals weekly or like let's say like things in my state or like my region, I think that would be like a way more streamlined process compared to what it is right
yeah, I think it also makes it a lot more accessible for all kinds of players. Some
now. 100%.
players may not have the same resources to be able to constantly fly around, and they may be able to compete at that high level skill wise, but may not be able to take on that challenge simply because of time constraints or traveling constraints, monetary constraints, etc. And also, I will point out that our rank up league is top 32. So if you qualify for that, you're just playing 5 rounds. If you win 5 rounds, you're going to the Asia finals. Whereas for the TCG side, even if you qualify through a regional, you get to your points playoffs. Oh no, wait, playoff is top
It's
16,
three
right?
three
Yeah.
yeah 3 rounds in the points playoff, and then you are qualified for.
All right, sorry, my bad. I think I was
Yeah.
thinking more about like the actual qualifier itself, because I heard there's like
Mm-hmm.
3,000, 4,000 entrants to qualify for Worlds, and it's only like the top 4 that go.
That would be our WCQ.
Um yeah, so yeah, NAWC, yeah. So with that in mind, like I think just from the sheer numbers, that kind of makes me believe that it may be harder for you guys. But of course, it's like I said, it just boils down to perspective on your entire experience and what you think is the easier process.
I mean, based on what you've explained to me, it sounds like yours. I'm not gonna say is easier, but it's definitely like a more enjoyable process where you're able to like just go to locals, and then like towards the end, like you have is it twice a year that the top 32 is played out for that qualifier, or is it just once?
So basically, they have the rank up league 2 a year.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sorry, 2 seasons a year, and each season has one for OCG and one for Asia English. So you end up having four winners go to the Asia final.
Okay.
Yeah. So in that sense, okay, like that's where it may appear hard to other people because that Asia final itself is where you have a room full of
The
skilled,
best.
relatively skilled players. Um, but when it comes down to at least qualifying for that Asia qualifier, it's more simplified in comparison to the TCG side.
Yeah. I mean, if you told me I just like we can compare it to like we'll say like the WCQ like Top Cut. Like if I got to qualify through that through winning a local regional or like doing well at my locals over a 6 month span, then I would definitely prefer just like to be placed in Top Cut of nationals. Just say okay, 7 or 8 rounds, and then you get to go to worlds off of that. Like that additional extra whatever 12 rounds of Swiss definitely adds a lot of variance to the ability to
Yeah.
qualify.
There's also, of course, the mental stamina as a player, which I do think is a strength that TCG players have over OCG players. But I guess that's a conversation for like 5 minutes later.
Yeah,
But I would say that that mental stamina plays a big role also in terms of how many rounds you're actually having to play.
100%. Yeah, we have a lot more events. The events I assume are longer, like in terms of like best of three and amount of time given. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Oh no,
real
ours
quick,
are best of three as well.
oh, all of yours are okay. So is that so? Yeah, explain to me a little bit difference between Asian English and OCG format. Like the tournament structure, just like the card pool currently, just like a brief overview if you don't mind.
Okay, so everything's the same except simply card pool. So if I
Okay.
remember correctly, Asia English started printing. Well, it was actually like printed in like 2008, 2007, like early on Yu-Gi-Oh! And then they kind of shut it down because there wasn't as much success. And then it came back, the first box being Dune, Duelist Nexus. Is it Duelist Nexus? Yeah,
Yeah,
Dune.
those Nexus.
And then basically what they do is they'll create like a creation pack which holds the archetypes for an upcoming set, and then they'll release that set. So for example, Dune had I can't remember exactly, but I
Unchained.
remember the creation pack had like Infernobles, it had Purely in it, it had
Okay.
Race, it had things like that. And then I think the Dune box would essentially kind of provide support for that. I think there was like Unchained and stuff like that as well.
Yeah,
So it's a
sure.
pattern that yeah, so it's a pattern that continues. So like Creation Pack 2 had pendulum stuff because Agov had pendulum stuff.
Okay.
So it's a continuous chain that's occurred until today. So I think the Asian English format started at the end of 2023 with like a Blue Eyes and Dark Magician structure deck. Like there was a fun little like AE introduction tournament where we could only use those structure decks. Um, so that was a lot of fun because it was like kind of old school Yu-Gi-Oh with a few new school cards.
Yeah.
Um, but since then, yeah. So basically, it's just kind of developed. It has its own ban list. For example, Asia English is the only format currently that has three Maxi. It still has VFD. It has two Gamma.
Oh, jeez.
Um, the formats. I like to call it. A lot of my friends also like to call it the Wild Wild West.
I was literally
Like,
gonna say
if you
that.
ever seen the like two Phantom of Yubels overlay into a VFD,
Oh my god.
or if you didn't know, Goblin Biker can make VFD under 5 summons. Like you don't learn about these things in other formats. Oh, we still have things like Halki Fibrax or Needle Fiber, however you want to call it.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, the format is pretty wild. Like it is, in my opinion, one of the most sacky formats, but it's also incredibly fun in terms of how you want to build your deck as well, because you have so many options. And yeah, it's a crazy format. We had Harpy at 3 at one point. We still have Reboot at 2. Like it's insane.
They're just wilding out over there. Those are like the ones that you look at online. And you're like, oh, this look like a fun format to like mess around with. But like then you show up to an event and you're just like, we're just rolling dice after a certain point. Like I don't really know what's gonna end up happening.
So the funny thing is that speaking of that, like my route to Worlds this year is actually I won the Asia English Rank Up League,
Oh wow.
um, and then yeah with Malice, and then I had to quickly switch back to OCG because so OCG releases products first, then TCG, and then about 3 to 4 weeks later AE gets the product. So if you think about the two formats, Asia English is essentially one format behind OCG every time.
Okay.
So like right now, OCG has moved on from Paradise to now Yummy being the best deck with Marshmallow essentially. And then you have Asia English side, which just got Justice Hunters and still has Paradise.
Okay.
So it's kind of this interesting thing. Like in OCG, I never got to play pure pure Vanquish Soul with Holy Sue in it. But in Asia English, that was my deck for the past 2 months. Yeah.
Right. So it's interesting. So you get two chances at a format essentially, which is kind of an interesting way to approach it.
Exactly. And also with that in mind, I mean, beyond the card pool, so the funny thing is that OCG gets the products first, so TCG can kind of look at OCG and be like, oh, okay, what was good from it, what was bad from it, and then try and solve things from there.
Yeah.
And then Asia English comes after that, and we're like, hey, we can look at both formats. So
Yeah.
for example, like I just mentioned, the Vanquish Soul of Holy Sue, like when that kind of came about, I had to look at a lot of TCG lists to kind of figure out like, okay, what have they kind of solved on their own? And then now how do I adapt this to a format that is so crazy with like 3 maxis, 2 reboots,
Yeah.
things like that.
I mean, yeah, that's really interesting. Like being able to like look back and forth. Yeah, I would really be curious to see how like if somehow at some way like at some point we all have the same ban list, like how things would deviate. Because obviously we'll get into a little bit later, like the Maxi debate discussion, like how does it affect everyone's perspective on the form. But
Right.
yeah, I'm like also just like the deck building process between both players, and I think we can move on. Is that the next slide? Okay, so
Yeah.
no, we'll do this real quick. Your thoughts and experience with Worlds, and then after that, we'll get into some more TCG versus OCG discussions. So yeah, take it away.
Right. Okay, I'm sure people who are watching this video would have seen my absolute flop in the top 8 match. I made 7 misplays and lost an unlosable game. I mean, I'm gonna eventually do a deck profile video where I'll kind of explain what happened, or at least to the best of my ability. And basically, what happened was simply I got too confident. I got too excited. My mistake was not being able to calm down and just collect myself and look at the situation properly. So I was just pressing buttons. I played amazing on day one. I made 2 mistakes, which are both on stream, coincidentally. And then the next day, I just showed up like a noob instead of the efficient player I was the day before, and that's that. And I think, yeah, it does. It I am in a lot of pain from it. I do feel very sad about it, and I'm constantly like, I'm a very competitive person. So I am still angry at myself, but I will say that shout out to players like Aditya, Pack, and Andy, where they gave me really wise and kind words to kind of say that it does really happen to anyone. And me and Aditya were just talking about misplays on stream, and he just said to me, like, the thing that you have to realize is that one bad showing doesn't discredit you as a player. And for me, like, these are essentially pro players, whereas I'm just a completely new face. So that meant a lot to me. And I think, yeah, people will hate if they can't relate. And it's just things happen. It's what it is. I will remain angry about my situation and what I did. um but we also have to be kind to understand that everyone's human, and I just rushed the situation. So yeah, I just got too excited. Who knew that that could be an issue as well? um but other than that, I had so much fun. I met so many amazing people. I think the entire Yu-Gi-Oh community, everyone is just super, like, everyone's just a sweetheart. It's something I never expected, from all the way to famous people. Like, I just want to give a shout out to like Dino, Andy, Yuna, Roselle, definitely butchering her name again, Tom, Johannes, like, I hope I'm not forgetting anyone. Oh, James, all these amazing people that I got to hang out with over the weekend. You know, they're all such high level players at the peak of their game, and the fact that they're worlds, and they're such good people down to heart. Like, I wish that I could have met Yuna top four and Tom in the finals. Because like we kind of had this agreement where we were just gonna have fun and we're just gonna laugh. And like, shout out to people like Isaiah, Felipe, Willie, you know, because they're also like at the top of the game, but they were also just having fun with me and just laughing. Even like Kim from Korea. Um, yeah, like every single round, I was just laughing, having so much fun with my opponent, and they were laughing as well. And I think it just goes to show that, like it's so super serious. Everyone's super serious about it at the lower level, but once you're at the top, like everyone's just relaxed because we all have a certain level of respect for each other, I guess. But at the same time, we're all human, and it was just a lot of fun. I felt super inspired. I also want to give a shout out to Mark from Thailand. I think he did great. Um, yeah, like yeah, and then of course, then there's so many other people that are like all the famous people like Lampy, Joshua Schmidt, Pack, um, like Aditya, like I never would have thought in my life I'd be able to talk to all these essentially like Yu-Gi-Oh celebrities, and everyone was just super down to earth and super receptive, and it was kind of a surreal experience. Like I got to meet Pac's dad. Like I would never would have thought I would be able to say that in my life, and then just over a weekend, like I had dinner and a 20-minute chat with Joshua Schmidt. I'm just like insane. I got to meet like Ruggles as well. Like it's just insane. Um, yeah, and even like in the top eight match, even though I flopped and played horribly, like me and Willie, we still had so much fun. Like at the hotel before we left for the venue, like Willie said good luck to me, and I just told him I was like, let's just have fun. And that was our first time interacting, and that's exactly what we did. Like before the match started, during the match, after the match, like we just were having a conversation as two people essentially becoming friends rather than like being like this is the competitive side. um yeah, so I think I wouldn't, besides my absolute flop and the fact that I should have gotten top four if I actually played like a proper player, um, I wouldn't have made any changes. I think honestly the weekend is pretty perfect. I have no regrets besides that one match.
That is, I get warm my heart hearing you say that. Like that is a good reminder of what at the end of the day this is. And like I've told this before on my channel, but like all of my best friends I've met through Yu-Gi-Oh, like I'm gonna be in 3 weddings over the course of the next year because of the friendships I made with this game. So I think it's really beautiful to like hear you describe like top of the game, like people like have all the opportunity and incentive in the world to just like be competitive and over the top and shark if the needs come or if the game comes down to it. But you and a lot of other people that you mentioned who are all from what I've experienced and met, like just hands down, is like top of the line humans. And even in the heat of battle, like you're always able to maintain that level of sportsmanship and camaraderie, which I think is beautiful. Really happy to hear the story, and everyone else is gonna get to hear it as well.
Yeah, I hope that like as cheesy as it is, like I hope that people can really deep down understand that it's still a game and something that you should enjoy. Like it's okay to be chill.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so now that we've had all the fun and games and the beauty of life and all, let's get into the actual discussion that I assume half the people here are trying to hear about. So, TCG versus OCG. First of all, like explain your experience with the TCG. It sounds like you've been looking at it from Asian English perspective for a little bit of time. Obviously, you met a lot of TCG players over the weekend. So, what do you know about the U.S. and like the Western video scene?
Um, well, okay, like even though I was looking at it for the past 2 months, it is limited to those 2 months.
Mhm.
It was also part of kind of like me preparing for Worlds. So before that, I never really had a good look at TCG. So I'm not super familiar. But I do watch a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh content on YouTube. Just like during meal times or even like I just like the game, so I like listening to stuff and watching stuff. Like from MBT to Jesse Cotton to Joshua Schmidt to Ruggles to DZ to Team Samurai X, like Nesh, Pack. Like I just consume a lot of that. Sometimes mindlessly, but I do. I even watch like progression series and stuff. So that's the extent of how familiar I am with TCG. It's just more through like mainstream content, if you will. But from the weekend, I did learn a bit more about the TCG in terms of like essentially maybe it's like differences in terms of certain plays that would be made, or even like just more of the process of getting to worlds. I think that's something that I learned as well. um yeah, so I wouldn't say that I'm super familiar with the TCG. However, a lot of the players that I've become friends with, a lot of them been telling me to go to a YCS and try it out and stuff. So maybe one day I'll show up at a YCS and just try my luck.
Right. Yeah. Let me know when I
And
will do my best to be there. That'd be fantastic.
I think if I were to show up to a YCS, I think it definitely have to be close to home first. So maybe Australia. I think coming out all the way to
Okay.
Europe or the US just to play Yu-Gi-Oh at this moment doesn't sound like the smartest idea.
Okay.
So we'll have to see how that goes.
Yeah. Alrighty. So sounds like you haven't. One of the questions was like, have you played TCG players before this world? It sounds like no. So what was
No.
your so what was your experience like playing versus TCG players? Obviously, you explained like the experiences you had with Willie in top eight, which was like super friendly and jovial and like a great time. Like was that your experience with all of the players that you played with in Swiss and overall, or anything else?
So I mean, I don't necessarily know if every single player was super like fun loving as me, but I would say that with my 7 round Swiss and my top 8 against Lily, I was very fortunate in my matchups because everyone was just super relaxed and chill. So when it comes down to the actual gameplay itself, the thing is that in this room, everyone is here for a reason. So there's a definitely a certain level of expectation in terms of skill. And like, I mean, sure, here there are a few misplays here and there. I think, yeah, maybe some of the TCG players may be less familiar with the cards simply because of time. Because we've had the Justice Hunter cards for a lot longer. However, I don't necessarily feel like there was a big difference in any like skill level or technical play. Um, like when I played against Isaiah in round 5, and I played Kim against Kim in round 2. Kim is from Korea, Isaiah is from the US. They're both playing Christian K9. Was there a difference in the gameplay or choices or anything like that? No. They're like it was like just I'm playing against a very skillful duelist that knows what they're doing. I think that's just the extent of it.
Yeah. I think that's a good acknowledgement. Like, you may like if you look at deck lists online, you may have like the questions of like who did this, why did they make those decisions, etc. But at the end of the day, like there is always like good decisions in Yu-Gi-Oh! And for people to continuously have success, for you obviously qualifying for Worlds and like everyone that did it, like you have to have some just kind of like basic understanding of like what makes a good decision in Yu-Gi-Oh! So like even if we're all obviously different origins and countries and languages, like you still have like some fundamental understanding of like, hey, this is a good play and this is why I'm doing it. Like you're not gonna get to Worlds off of getting super lucky just like one time. Like you have to have some form of an understanding of how you got there. Be able to continue that process if you're especially the later you go and like top eight of Worlds. Like you didn't get lucky to get there as well. Like you did something correctly along the way.
Yeah, I think like the thing that people have to understand about Worlds and the Worlds format is that like because of how unique it is, it depends on of course on how much time you have to test and practice. But when it comes down to the actual gameplay, the thing is that everyone there or majority there know exactly what they're doing. They're not gonna like really I mean I'm about to say this like I don't think they necessarily like misplay super hard even though I did. But everyone has like a general understanding of what's going on, so with that in mind, two factors really kick in my opinion. One is deck building, but the biggest factor is luck as well. Like luck is such a big factor because I know, for example, like Willie, he went X2 before actually winning the next 5 rounds, and it was simply because he was bricking.
Yeah.
Aditya also was had like a very unfortunate time because his deck just wasn't responding to him. So it really like boils down to your luck that day because you can technically high roll the whole competition, and that's what tends to happen anyway.
I mean, yeah, like when you look at the end of Swiss, and obviously, shout out to Ruben, world champion of 2024. He'll always have that for him. He had a poor showing in this Worlds, and my friend Aditya, who also had a very poor showing, and I helped him prep for this event. Like, I'm not gonna say they're bad players just because they had one bad tournament. Like, the way I describe it, like Jesse Cotton doesn't win every YCS, even though we think he's one of the best in the game. Like, he doesn't top every YCS even. Like, there's always going to be that level of variance in Yu-Gi-Oh that people need to understand and give some level of respect to. That like just because there's one poor event, and obviously when you are Aditya or you are Ruben, and like you are capable of more. It really sucks that like on the world stage where everyone's watching, like that is where it happened. But at the same time, like you said, you made a mistake in top eight doesn't take away from your ability as a duelist. It just happened, and the next time you're in that situation, you're gonna do better.
Yeah, exactly. Like I think, well, number one, to me at least, a lot of these things are painful lessons. They're lessons that we'll take with us for the rest of our careers. And like whether it is the actual gameplay or it's simply a mental state, like my lesson for me is to learn how to calm down and assess the situation properly. I think these are things that we have to consider. And I think it's also important to remember, and this is definitely something that I've learned recently this year, is that everyone is just a human. You know, everyone's gonna make a mistake here and there. Everyone's gonna misread a card or, proceed with the wrong game plan. Like for example, for me, I should have made Zeus. That was my like sixth misplay. I should have made Zeus, but instead I went to SP because I tunneled in on the minion, or like I activated Caesar's effect because I was like, oh, let me keep it on field to make rock, but in reality I should just let it bounce. Things like that. Like it's just these small things that we just fail to make the right decision in that point of time, but you also have to register that we're all human and we make these kind of mistakes, and it's just sometimes it's high pressure situations, but sometimes it's just it is what it is.
Yeah, I mean, also like the fact that you or like someone like me, like within like 3 seconds of making the wrong play, I recognized that it was the wrong play. So I'm
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, so like obviously I know I am capable of making the right play. I just did it 3 seconds late, but it doesn't matter. The result is still the same. Um, so just like a
Yeah, like
really over.
yeah, I registered it like after already, and I walked back to the player room, and all the others were just like, "Bro, like WTF?" And I'm like, I know, everyone's telling me the right play," and I'm like, "I know,"
Yeah,
and
we all know.
it's gonna continue to tilt me and annoy me that everyone's gonna come up to me and tell me the right play. I had my WhatsApp filled with it as well, like with all the Singaporean players. Like I
Same.
already know what went wrong, and
Yeah.
it's a skill as well to be able to recognize and acknowledge what went wrong and just
Oh,
to be able to assess that for the future.
yeah. So yeah, I guess we'll get to like the final topic, Maxi. I guess that's like probably like the biggest distinguisher between the two formats. So there's a lot of discourse on Twitter and just in general. So what are your opinions on the card? I'm not sure if you're familiar with Master Duel format at all. So between OCG, Asian English, Master Duel, and then obviously in the TCG where we don't have it at all. So how do you think that card shapes both the format and then some of the players that play in those formats? It has any effect on that?
Yeah, so I managed to talk about Maxi to a few of the Master Duel people, players. Like I had a bit of a chat about it with Nesh, with Joshua Schmidt as well. And then of course, I mean, I accidentally kind of started a lot of the discourse on Twitter because I mean, my perspective was shared in the interview, the post match interview, where I think it should be banned, and the reason why is because I feel like um there's certain games in the OCG where you simply win off Maxi, and a lot of our deck building is also kind of skewed around this card. However, I wouldn't just be like, oh, TCG is better because of that. Like, there's still other cards that is broken to you guys, and you feel like there's no way you can come back to the game. Where even I myself feel like, hey, like this card is kind of healthy. For example, like I think reboot at one makes sense to me because judgment is just a blowout, things like that. But at the end of the day, like this is just down to each individual player. And I also did make a comment. I think it wasn't the most appropriate comment at the time during that interview where I said that Maxi kind of makes certain players lazy in terms of their thinking. I think what people have to realize is that I don't represent the whole OCG community, and that comment does not apply to the whole OCG community. That comment probably applies to maybe like some players at your ranking locals or some players at the casual, but it doesn't apply to every single player. For example, like I think that every single OCG player at Worlds, like they do not represent that lack of thinking ability that Maxi kind of can provide for some people. So like I think everyone there was super skilled. So with that in mind, like I don't think that that's a reason why people think OCG players are not doing as well at Worlds. In my opinion, why we may not be doing as well as Worlds is simply because of how, one, well, at least for this year, is more of because the format. If you look at the card pool of what's available to us, the format is more similar to TCG than OCG. And also if you look at the list as well. So I think that's one reason. But for the past 2 years, I can't necessarily speak because I've not looked at into those in depth. However, last year we did have a Japanese player in the top four, and we had the Chinese player in the top eight. So with that in mind, like I don't necessarily think it's like, oh, OCG players are doing bad. I don't think that's necessarily true. Sometimes it's just down to high rolling. For example, in my case, I don't think I'm better than any of the players that I beat necessarily to get to top eight. Like in my opinion, I think a player like Dino deserves the top eight way more than some of the players in the top eight. If we're really talking about like skill or innovation or like building to really win the tournament. For me, in my case, I played VSK9, which is a super high roll deck. So I just high rolled my way to top eight. It's as simple as that. Like that's just the nature of the deck. That's just the style of the deck, and I kind of made that choice because that's the style that I wanted to play with, and that made me feel like I had the highest chance of becoming world champion. But that's the thing. Like it doesn't come down to like TCG players are better than OCG players or the vice versa. Sometimes it really just boils down to luck. But I would also say sometimes it boils down to deck building as well. I would point out that, for example, I was talking about the deck with Andy, the Australian representative, and I told him I wish I had that conversation with him before I submitted my deck list
Yeah.
because he had insights into the deck that I didn't really think of, and my deck building choices, even some of my plays that I made, were things that I kind of took from the OCG. So, for example, like the one Kurikara in my main, that was something that worked well for me in practice. But then when it came down to playing against the TCG players, or maybe because they're better players, I'm not too sure. But everyone kind of like could register that that's a card that exists in the format. Um, what's the other one? Yeah, even like certain extra deck choices, like the and even like yeah, it just boils down to, oh, even the Pancratops decision. One, I would definitely cut it from my side deck, which the TCG players would have, but the OCG players would play Pancratops. The reason why it's into a yummy board, but also because the reason why I summoned Pancratops before I harpied in my top eight match was because often in OCG, whenever I summoned Pancratops first, it would get Solemn Judgment. Some people, like I think DB Grinder as well, kind of registered what I was doing, but a lot of the other TCG players just said it's a misplay. You should just harpy first because
Yeah.
you're gonna like trade away half their life or the entire back row. But the thing is that I just went off muscle memory, which is why I summoned Packer Tops first, and I will admit that was my first misplay that day, that match out of like 7 misplays. So with that in mind, like it does kind of there is a kind of like a small difference in style, I think, and it just boils down to what kind of culture you're familiar with in terms of gameplay. But I don't think it reaches a crazy extent where it can really like differentiate the player bases to say that one is better than the other. I think that's extremely unfair to both formats and both player bases. And I think that if a player is good enough that they can adapt to whatever format they wish to, as long as they put in the time. And I would not discredit the other OCG players from putting in that time, and I think that they all adapted well. I One of the Japanese players, he was X2 and then had a double loss in the last round. So you never know, if he didn't have that double loss, he could be in the top eight as well. Like it's not so easy to say that like one group of players is better than the other. Like I think it's really unfair, to be honest. But beyond that, Maxi does make a big impact in terms of essentially deck building, because one cross out, two called by for us. Like we have a lot of decks like that we kind of have. I mean, a lot of card choices that we have to make to kind of out that card because it can be game defining. So in my opinion, that's where OCG may be less skillful because I can just close my eyes and throw Maxi, and I can win a game from that. And also, that's why in our format we have more two ofs or one ofs. Um, the Because your Maxi can essentially draw into a nib, or your Maxi can draw into a Lancia, things like that. And the reason is also because we don't want to see more than one or two copies in your hand. So the math is a bit different as well. And I don't necessarily think that all OCG players follow this logic, but I feel like at least the layman would.
I think that's all incredibly insightful. I'll say like really quickly, to defend like the TCG OCG thing. When you look at the amount of competitors at Worlds, 27 in total this year. If I remember correctly, it was 7 OCG and 20 TCG. So
Yeah.
that representation discrepancy is definitely a contributing factor as to why there is such a big difference in the top cut representation. If you look at like a deck like we'll say Vanquish Soul Canine in Swiss, and you see whatever 25% of it in Swiss, or like of the Swiss was Vanquish Soul Canine, and you expect something around 25, maybe 30 to 33% representation to move forward, and I think that's also how the player pool should be looked similarly. So I think it's like a pretty big factor that people aren't really giving respect to when it comes to that discussion.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if you also even look at the Swiss round scores, like we had three X3 people make it to top eight. And we also had, so we had the Japanese player who had the double loss. We also had Mark from Thailand. He also went on an X3 record. So like it does kind of boil down to the nitty-gritty in that sense. I don't think it's so easy to objectively say one format or one base of players is better than the other.
Yeah. And then yeah, the last thing I'll add on the deck building thing is I will say me personally, I was like really anti OCG, like we'll say like 3 years ago in terms of deck building. Like I didn't agree with
Right.
like really any decision. I was like, why are all these one and two ofs there? But now that we've got like the mulch armies in the format, I'm now beginning to understand like the math of it being a little bit different. So I like now I'm like, okay, like hey, they were right a little bit. Like you'll see me like post side go to two of a card, or even like I'll side like one or two Nibiru in a situation where I know it's going to be available. I don't want to clog on it, etc. So like I
Mm-hmm.
think even like yeah, like especially when like the communities are not able to communicate as well. Obviously, you speak very eloquently and in English, but like
Thank you.
I can't communicate with someone who speaks Japanese as well. So I can't just like
Neither
run
can
around and
I.
ask them these questions. So I think that is another big thing that people do is I think especially as time has progressed, they just see something different and they just be like, oh, that's wrong, instead of giving some amount of credence to, hey, maybe they were right in this situation. Why is that situation correct for them?
Yeah, I think also like a big deck building difference is that TCG often built for max consistency. Like I think the biggest issue that players would have with certain decks, like VSK9 for example, is that like it's too inconsistent, it's this and that. Whereas OCG, um, their deck building style is sometimes actually more like how can I play around the most things. So it's not necessarily just maxi. Like for example, certain malice decks would also just try play around, like just losing to a Lancia or just losing to an imperm, things like that.
Yeah.
So I think the logic kind of goes into it differently as well, and it depends on what kind of values you prioritize. And I think don't think that either one is absolutely correct or absolutely wrong. I think I see a merit to both sides of how the deck building process works. Um, and honestly, for the future, for the next time I go to Worlds, um, I plan to kind of fuse and incorporate both perspectives, and like really just understand both sides of the same coin, if you will.
Alrighty, Shane, it's been an honor and a pleasure. I've loved this conversation. I can't wait to share with everybody. Any final words before I let you go and enjoy the rest of your holiday?
Yeah, I just want to give like a few massive shout outs. Massive shout out first to my girlfriend Karen. She supported me throughout this entire journey, and she's super proud and excited for me even when I'm emoing in the corner. Also shout out to all my friends back in Singapore, everyone that helped me, Calvin, Jiaheng Baha, Yogi, Lao Niang, Yi Hong, Yi Kang, so like yeah, just so many people, and also of course my the friends that have been with me throughout this journey. Loyu, Kautier, Aston, CL, Izzy, Eugene, Zhao Guang, people like them, and also the people that started with Boas, Emil, and people like ZP as well. Just so many people. The entire Singapore community came behind my back to really help me practice and help me build my deck and give like different opinions on even what deck I should play because I was playing Yummy. I played Draco Tail as well. I played Christian K9. I was testing quite a bit on what deck to bring, and like everyone was just super supportive to help me teach me how these decks work and figure it out. And of course, shout out to Agora Hobby. Best card shop in Singapore, in my opinion. If you come down to Singapore, you want to check out Card Shop, that's the place to be at. They do casuals every Tuesday, Thursday. And yeah, I think that's about it. Sorry if I took too long
No.
over this conversation. I kind of went off yapping, but hopefully my sharing provides some insights to at least like how our format kind of feels. And also, thank you so much for giving and providing me this opportunity to share.
No, I loved every second of it. Thank you. Congratulations on your success. I expect nothing but big things from you in the future.
Thank
Um,
you.
yeah, of course.
Maybe at a YCS. I'll see if I can show up to a YCS.
Sounds like a
It's time to
plan.
learn some TCG.
All right, my man. It was a pleasure. You have a good one. Yeah, we'll see you around. Thanks for joining.